Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're in the world. This is Augie of the Blago Blabber Podcast. Welcome to another show. So just a little bit of an update. These podcasts get posted to, well, the primary is Anchor.fm, and then now I've kind of updated my thing for Anchor to upload it, to a bunch of other podcast sites or apps, as you want to call them. So now it's on a variety of different things, from Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts soon. So just a heads up. Now, obviously, as I said before, it's going to be on YouTube as well. I'll just upload the entire podcast onto YouTube. So for those who don't know, believe it or not, I know we haven't even played the Euros yet. They were supposed to be this summer because of the whole pandemic. But World Cup qualifying gets underway very soon, in about 4 months' time, end of March. And, the groups are picked, and, now we wait to see what happens, and there's some really good groups, there's some weaker groups, and basically I'm just here to talk a little bit about Serbia and what to expect, how far we can go, lineups, who the next coach might be, because there's words that Tumakovic might not be back, some of the candidates and things like that. But first I want to take a look at the roster as a whole, because there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions at some positions, and then there's a lot of good players at some positions and not enough at others, and there's some where we have none at all. So I kind of want to just take a look at the roster a little bit and maybe talk about some of the U21s coming up, who could make a little bit of a splash, so to say, with the first team, the national team. So I guess it's only right to start with the goalkeepers. So we have two really good ones for the first time in a very long time. So we have Predrag Rajkovic and Marko Dimitrovic. So Rajkovic is in Rennes in France, and Dimitrovic is in Eibar in Spain. He's been there for probably 3 years now, 3 seasons. Dimitrovic is an outstanding keeper, and so is Rajkovic. So the question kind of becomes, who is the number one? And Rajkovic has been capped 18 times, and Dimitrovic has been capped 16 times. So it's not like one has 50 caps and the other one has, 10. So it's very close, because Rajkovic has been around for a while. Dimitrovic has had a little bit of a different journey, playing at some lower league clubs in Hungary and stuff like that, and never got a chance to play with Red Star pretty much. So he's made it very far, so to say. He's a big, bulkier guy, so to say, and Rajkovic is shorter with outstanding reflexes. I mean, Dimitrovic has outstanding reflexes as well, but that's Rajkovic's game as well. So I think the question kind of becomes, I don't really know if we even know who our number one is. Rajkovic played in the Scotland matches for the Euro, qualifying the last round of the playoff, or whatever it's called, which we ended up losing, unfortunately. But he was the starter, and I think going forward, he probably is the answer. I wouldn't be surprised if this is kind of a goalkeeper by committee type of thing, where whoever is in better form starts the matches. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I actually think that's something that might actually happen. Even though I'm not saying Dimitrovic was bad or anything like that, but I think Rajkovic starting was the right move, and Dimitrovic kind of waits. But he could get his chance, because, like I said again, they're both really good keepers, and that's like a position we don't have to worry about for a number of years now. And even like the third keepers, Georgia Nikolic from Basel is there as well. Georgia Petrovic coming up from Trkarički. There's Rocko from Ferencvaros, I believe. The goalkeeper isn't the issue. The issue of position is a little bit of an issue is center back, because you have Nikola Milenkovic, who is going to be your starter for the next, he's about 23 now, for the next 10 years at least. Hoping he stays healthy, and that's his position pretty much. Then there's a bunch of question marks, because there's guys who kind of are knocking on the door and start one match and then they're kind of out of the squad. Like Nikola Maximovic was one of them, but he just wasn't good enough. Sakina Pavlovic is someone I would kind of force. I would literally force him into playing that position. He's only 19 years old, I believe. So when there's not many options, going with a younger guy isn't really the worst thing you can do. His first match, I believe it was his first match that was really good, and his second one he was really bad. And then we kind of took him out of the lineup and didn't let him play the match after that. But that's going to happen with a 19-year-old. You're going to have growing pains. Urs Bajic was really good in that. I believe it was the Scotland match that he played in because Kolarov was out injured. He was outstanding. The thing with him is just inconsistency, and he's injured quite a bit. And you really don't know what to expect. Like when he plays, he's really good, but like he's injured a lot. And then you have Kolarov, who's still the captain. We don't know what's going to happen with him, if he's going to retire, if he's going to come back. I don't mind him starting at the center back position. He just can't start as a left back or a right back because it seems like we don't really even know anymore. But I have no issues with him. He's a really good passer of the ball at least, and he's still pretty darn good at set pieces. So keeping him there, I have nothing against that. If he was holding someone else out of a lineup who deserved the spot, then I'd say maybe it's time to retire. But there's really no one pushing him there, and it just seems like we have 2 or 3 really good center backs. So it's not like he's taking someone's spot who deserves it more than him. And then the position of concern is left and right back, which is kind of a wing back position because of the formation that we do play. So if it's 3-4-2-1 or 3-4-3 or 3-4 or 3-5-2 or depending on whatever the formation is. So Mladenovic was really good when he came on against Scotland. He really created some stuff, him and Qatar, who came on late, really created some stuff, and I was really impressed with him. He had a bunch of assists against Russia. He scored. He really knows, and I've been following him. He played at Red Star a few years back, and I've been following his career ever since he left because he's one of the players that I really liked. He was intriguing to me because he was like 120 pounds soaking wet. Like, there's literally nothing to see. But he's a fairly strong guy for his size. And even though I'm following him in Polish leagues, he gets a lot of assists. Like, he's just a great assist man. And it's something that we can use right now because he's a little bit older. So he's born in 91, so what was it, 29? So he is a good assist man. So I would try to use him as much as we can because there's literally no one else pushing him for that position. We do have Mihailo Ristic, who's playing more and more as a left back for even his club Montpellier in France. So that's also not a bad option. And he's a little bit younger, a lot more younger. So if he starts, then I mean it's not undeserved because he had a really good game against Norway there in the playoffs as well, and he was really good. So I was impressed with how well he played, and he's only 25, so he still has a good. If you compare it to Kolarov, he has another at least 10 years left in him at the position that he plays. And then you got guys like Lazovic and Kostic who can kind of play right wing back or left wing back, or it depends on where you throw them out there. Kostic is a little bit younger. Lazovic is getting into his 30s, but he's blossomed very well for the national team, and he's kind of a guy that you plug in as well. A lot of the same attributes as Ristic and Mladenovic. They all seem to be very similar players. So I wouldn't mind seeing him. I mean, he starts now, and I fully expect him to be the starter until he loses the spot, if he loses the spot. And I have no issues with him playing there. I'm not really. I used to be a big proponent of letting like the younger guys play, even if he's like 2-3 years younger. Now I just don't care. Like, if you're good enough and you're in form, you should be playing. And younger guys are just gonna have to work harder. And in the midfield, it's a little bit. Lukic has had a really good season in Torino scoring-wise, but he also plays up the pitch a lot more than he does for the national team, where in the national team he plays as a defensive midfielder, basically. So him and Maximovic are good players, but not very good when they play together for some odd reason. So I fully expect if Gudel, if we use him as a midfielder, as defensive midfielder, his name has to be one of the first on the list because he's been absolutely outstanding in the last 4 or 5 matches that he's played for the national team. First of all, wherever you need him to play, he's going to play. You can argue that he's been the heart and soul of the team in every match that he's actually played, in the 4 or 5 that he's played. He's been really good, and I've been really impressed. I kind of wrote him off once he went to China, just for the same reasons that fans write guys off when they go to China. It's to earn a paycheck and stuff like that. But he's come back to Sevilla, and he's been a key. He doesn't. I think he starts a little bit more now, but he didn't really start too many matches, and then, all of a sudden he was starting, and he's coming off the bench, and he's playing all these different roles, and center back isn't a position that he's not accustomed to because he played there for Serbia. So I could see him, pairing up with a guy like Marko Grujic, I guess. Grujic is on loan at Porto now from Liverpool, and I think Liverpool's going to have to make a decision on him very soon as well, what they're going to do with him. I think for the future, it's Marko Grujic's spot to kind of lose. He's still a very young guy. He's 24. So, I mean, if he can kind of take that position and run away with it, I think him and Guda for now. And then you have Maksimovic. I actually like Maksimovic a lot. So if Maksimovic starts, I don't mind that either. He's only a year older than Grujic, or if you want to pair them up, and they know each other from the younger ranks as well. So it's not like this is something like they've never played together before. I don't mind any of that. We just have to figure out what our best 2 in the midfield are. Or if we play in a 3-5-2, then you're gonna have 3 guys in that midfield. So you can ultimately have, a guy like Grujic, Gudel, and Dukic, for example, or Maksimovic, or something like that. The wing position is kind of another one that's kind of uncertainty. There's guys, but no one's really, taken that position. And I was impressed with, as many were, with Nemanja Radonic. He scored 2 or 3 really nice goals, and then he got injured, obviously. Of course, that happens to us, for the national team. And he doesn't play much at Marseille, and you kind of wonder what's going to happen with his career there. There are rumors that he's going to be sold or loaned out in this last transfer window. We really don't know what's going to happen in January. He's had some injury issues as well. I don't know if I don't think they're going to keep him. So I fully expect him to get loaned out in January and then probably sold in the summer. It's what I'm thinking. Because as of right now, unless there's a coaching change, which could actually happen as well, I don't see him being a part of the plans over there. And he just doesn't play a lot, and they paid a hefty fee for him. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. It's just a little situation to kind of keep a track of. Lazar Rangelovic is also another player. He's an Olympiacos player. I would say he's pretty much a full-time starter for Olympiacos now. Doesn't play too much for the national team though, so that's something to keep an eye on too. I think maybe slowly ease him in, and then you got Milinkovic-Savic, who's a very interesting player, because he'll either score 2 goals for you like he did against Norway, or you won't even notice him on the pitch. There's really no in between with him. So it's interesting. I've watched a lot of Lazio matches, and everything kind of runs through him. But in the national team, he has a bit of a different role, because there's guys like Tadic on the team who are the real playmakers, I guess you can say. So it's interesting to see. In the first 5-10 minutes, you know what you're going to pretty much get from him for the rest of the game. So it's another situation to keep an eye on. I think with Milinkovic-Savic, you're going to use him if he fits into your plan of what your point of attack is and things like that. He's not someone who you're going to start every match regardless of who you play. So it's going to be more strategic based. And I think the same goes for other players as well, like Kostic and the guys that I mentioned with like Ristic and Lazovic and Mladenovic. It's going to be based on what you think your plan of attack that match is. And I think that's how it's going to go kind of from now on until guys cement themselves as true starters in the national team. And that's just basically how it's going to go. And then the attacking midfield part, if that's what we go with, is obviously Dusan Tadic. And he's getting up there in age as well. He's 32. And then, we still have Filip Djurdjic, who has been really good for Sassuolo. He's kind of reborn. He's a little bit older now, 28, but I mean, he still has. I mean, if Tadic is 32 now and he's kind of been in his best years the last 2-3 years, then you can argue that Filip Djurdjic is getting there right now. And I'm really happy for him because I've been following him from when he was basically 19, 20. I believe he went to Olympiacos then, and then Herenveen, and then bounced around a bunch. But he's always a player that I like, and I'm happy that he's finally getting time in Sassuolo to kind of showcase what he can do, and Berardi there, and they have some good players there. So I'm really happy for him. And then you have up top, it's starting to get a little bit interesting because Aleksandar Mitrovic has been the guy up top for 3-4 years now. But he's starting to play less and less for Fulham, which is worrisome for the national team. Jovic doesn't play much for Real Madrid either, but you can argue that he's in better form right now for the national team than Mitrovic is. And then you have Dusan Vlahovic, who's waiting in the wings as well. And then you also have Jota Despotovic, who's kind of getting into his best years right now. He's another little bit, I guess, so to say, older player, if you want to call, 28 old. So it's very interesting to see what happens with that position, because I don't think Mitrovic is. He was one of the guys that, for the last 2-3 years, that you started every match up top. Like, there was no discussion. Like, his position was safe no matter what, just because we didn't have, others at that position, or at least no one who to really challenge him. Jovic was, I guess, he had a really good run in Eintracht Frankfurt, but it was really Mitrovic's position, and he's had maybe 2 bad games for the national team. I don't think you take him out of it. I mean, that's cruel. He's been there for the national team, and it'd be cruel to take him out because he's had 1 or 2 bad games or something like that. Like, I wouldn't be able to do that to him. So, I mean, you can always go with, if you go with 3-5-2 formation, you can start both guys, and you kind of get the best of both worlds, because Mitrovic is more of a bigger bruiser type of guy, where Jovic is actually something like 6'1", but he can kind of push his weight around a little bit, and he can kind of surprise you with some of the goals that he scored. Like, headed goal against Scotland was something I didn't really expect, but here we are, and he scored it. It was a big goal at the time. Obviously, didn't get us really anywhere, but scored the goal was great. Let me just get a little drink of water. So I think Mitrovic is still the starter, but Jovic is knocking on the door, and Dusan Vlahovic has had a good season and a half at Fiorentina, and we don't really know what's going to happen with him. There are some teams who wanted him from the Bundesliga. There's teams from Serie A, so it's going to be interesting to kind of follow his situation. And then you have guys who would come off the bench, I guess, and kind of create a difference, or try to create a difference. Like, there's guys like Qatar, and I think Milivojevic will still be with the national team. And like I said, I mentioned Milinkovic Savic. If he doesn't start, he's going to be playing most matches off the bench, so he's going to be relied upon to make a difference once he comes on. And Filip Kostic as well. So those are the kind of guys that are going to have to wait in the wings for their chance, I guess. In terms of the games that we are playing for the qualifiers, look, we get Ireland and Portugal in the first 2 matches at home. You can look at that as really bad or really good, and I'm kind of somewhere in the middle, because sure, you get the 2 teams that are kind of your level, I guess, in the first 2 matches, and you get them at home, which is kind of, if one match was at home and the other one was away, I think that'd be better. But when you get both at home right away in the first 2 matches, I don't like that too much, because then you gotta go away later on when you might need the points, and it's hard to win in Ireland, and it's almost impossible to win in Portugal. So that's good. That's kind of the thing that jumps out at you right away. And then there's 3 matches in the first, I believe, week or 10 days. which is nuts. And it's it's the end of March. I think it's the 24th, 27th, 30th, or something like that. And then Qatar is thrown in this league. Since we have 5 teams in this group, Qatar's thrown as like the friendly matches. And look, Luxembourg match and the Azerbaijan match are going to be interesting as well. Like, those are very pesky teams. Like, Luxembourg's beat some quality opponents lately, and Azerbaijan has done the same. Like, those aren't really gimme matches. Those are trap matches, what they call. It's matches that you expect to win, but there's a chance that you could possibly lose it. And then the last match is away to Portugal. So, look, it could all come down to that. That's literally that's the match that it could come down to. And at some point it will, because either Portugal will be through or will be knocking on the door, with a chance to kind of make it as well. And I believe that 13 teams make it out of Europe, 10 winners and 3 more out of the playoffs. So there's 10 groups, so I guess 6 make it out of, does that make sense? Yeah, I guess that makes sense. So 6 make it out of the 10 groups, and then 4 I guess go home. Something like that, probably. Sorry, I haven't really looked that one up. That much. So in terms of like the U21s, Serbia's been really good in the last, I would say, 8-9 years with producing young players, and like when Milinkovic Savic was coming through, and a lot of these other guys, Mark Dujic and Maksimovic, and as I mentioned before, there's really something to look forward to. And as soon as they turn 22, 23, we're like, okay, well, they're too old for the U21s now, and we expect them to make a splash with the national team. It's really not like that anymore. There's not any players that you look at and say, oh, he's going to be a really good player when he makes the national team, or when he starts playing for the national team. So we've kind of hit a little bit of a dry spell, I guess you can say. One of the only guys I can say is Ivan Ilic, who's starting to play a lot for Hellas Verona right now as well. He was born in 2001. He was at 19. So he's one, and probably one of the only ones. As I'm looking through the list, there aren't many. I mean, Slobodan Dedic is another one, who's on loan in Netherlands. Who else is there on this list? Let me see. Veljko Bermančić as well, Čukarički player. He's had a really good start to the season. There were some rumors that Red Star were interested in him as well. Kind of fell through, or he's never really talked about. With Čukarički, they weren't satisfied with the money that was given. Dan Jovic is another guy who came up with Red Star, and he played for Eintracht Frankfurt the same time that Jovic did, and he was supposed to be kind of the guy to take over for Jovic once Jovic left. And he hasn't really. He's alone in Austria. Wolfsberger, who's in the Europa League, but he does play for them. He starts most matches, so hopefully he can get into a little bit of form. But in terms of defenders and stuff like that, there's really not much to go off unless somebody really comes out in the next year or so. There's really not many names that you can kind of look at and say, yeah, we can see that guy. Alex Terzic is a guy who also came up through Red Star and is at Empoli now. But there's really not much, and like I said, we've hit a little bit of a dry spell in terms of producing young players right now, which obviously happens. It's been a good 8, 9, 10 year run for us, so you gotta hit a dry spell at some point. The manager situation is also very interesting, because Ljubiša Tumbaković could be on his way out. We're kind of waiting to see what happens, and I honestly think that he is. If he doesn't resign, he's going to get fired. And the candidates are then like Vladan Milovic, who was the Red Star manager for the past 3 years before Stanković took over. He is probably my first choice. He should be the first choice, I think. And then there's guys like Veljko Paunovic, who's at Reading. I mean, he just joined Reading, so I don't know if they would release him right away. There's Ivic, who's at Watford, but again, he joined this past summer, so I don't know if he'd leave as well. In terms of that, like, there's Marko Nikolic from I believe Lokomotiv Moscow, who's in Champions League. I don't know what the situation is there. I don't know if they play their match tomorrow, I guess, and I think they still have a chance at either going through to the Europa League, or I think they might even have a chance at progressing to the round of 16 in the Champions League. But he's been there for, I think, a year now, so all the coaches that are kind of being brought up have been on their jobs for, not a very long time. So it's going to be interesting what happens with that, and that might be a reason why we just keep Tumbakovic, because these guys have just taken over, and it's probably going to cost a lot of money just to even get those guys in. I was reading today that Milivojevic is probably going to demand something like €1 million if he comes in, and I think he would be the best choice, just because also he's been in United Arab Emirates for about a year and a half now, so he's been there for a little while now, I guess you could say. But I think he would make the most sense because of what he already did with Red Star. I mean, 3 years, you got twice in Champions League, once in Europa League. It's a big accomplishment for a club that wasn't doing well. And his disciplinary is next to no one. He's one of my favorite managers. He's my favorite manager ever to manage Red Star. Apart from maybe Prsinečki, who I really liked as well. More of attacking coach, whereas Milivojevic is a little bit of defensive coach. Like, he'll really buckle down on his defense, and I think that rubs some people the wrong way. But honestly, as long as you get the wins, then it's whatever. I have no issue with it at all. Some people don't like it, but at the end of the day, honestly, it's the most important thing, getting wins. So I don't mind his playing style, and obviously, like I mentioned earlier, like, the formation needs to be sorted out. But what we're gonna do, who's gonna start where? There's a lot of positions that need filling. There's question marks about some guys. There's guys that are injured, and with this COVID stuff, guys are gonna be pulling out of matches because of COVID and positive tests and stuff like that. So going forward, I expect us to challenge. Ireland's a really good team, but I think we have more skill, and we should be better than them. But then again, we've had the skill in past years as well, and we didn't do very well. We finished third, fourth in some of the groups. So it will be interesting to see. And Portugal is, in my opinion, maybe the best team in the world right now. Like, they're stacked at every position. Like, when you have half the Wolves team playing for you, and you still got Ronaldo, and you got Rui Patricio in these Wolves, and the back line with, like, Semedo and all these guys, like Ruben Diaz, like, they have center backs now, they have right backs now, they have left backs, they have midfielders, they have strikers, they have wings, they have everything, they have a good coach. They're probably the most complete team in the world, including Germany, including Brazil, including all these other teams. So it's going to be a very, very interesting match. The two matchups that we have against them, and right off the bat, the first two matches we play the two teams who we think are going to challenge. I mean, three teams that can challenge: Serbia, Ireland, Portugal, but we have the two. That would be a threat to us. So that's going to be very interesting. So that's it for today's podcast. I enjoy doing this. I like talking about rosters. I enjoy talking about, who start where, what teams need to look at, and stuff like that. So remember to subscribe to my podcast. I upload it in a bunch of media, but Anchor FM and YouTube are the two main ones. I try to use Instagram as much as I can, both the personal and the podcast account. I use Twitter for that as well. I'm going to start using Twitter for that to kind of advertise some stuff too. I'm going to try to do some Facebook stuff. So yeah, life's good. Stay safe, guys. And I will see you again some other time. Take care, guys.